help me with option floor. We have an option floor within your bull market. What's an option floor?
I think we do, Tom. I kind of think the market, the overall stock market today, because of the vaccines, is a little bit like a covered call, where you can be a bull, there's upside, but if there's not, I think there's a floor under this market because of how close the vaccines are to being implemented. If we're talking spring, a few months, if the present discounted value of that puts a floor under this market, can only sell off so much before it's going to bring buyers in, just looking at the present discounted value of 2021, so that the vaccine announcement, even though it isn't here, in the sense that you know it's coming, I think gives you upside without as much downside as you had before the announcement, much like a covered call.
I think, Jim, a lot of people share that view with you right now. I think many people are just uncomfortable being short this market going into what could be something really transformational, which makes me wonder what it would take to see some real capitulation, Jim. What would it take?
Well, I think that I do think there's bullishness about 2021 and bearishness in the short term. And you almost kind of wonder, Jonathan, it might work out the other way around. What if the market just runs right through this period where everyone's highly worried, and then maybe it stalls once we get to the spring or summer? In other words, it's sort of, buy on the fear and sell on the trumpets when they come. And I kind of wonder about that a little bit, just because there is so much short-term bearishness and longer-term bullishness right now.
So is there anything in the short term that could transpire that would affect your view longer term, not necessarily with being a bull, but in terms of valuations or in terms of what you want to buy?
Well, certainly, Lisa, the pandemic, if the cases keep surging and death rates go up, I mean, that's the biggest risk. There's no doubt about that. That could take the economy down if we have to do a complete shutdown again. I think the odds of that are low. One of the reasons I think the economy may do better than people think is that you can't shut down what you've already shut down. I mean, we're shutting down restaurants, hotels, airlines, gyms that are already, mostly shut down across much of the country. 75% of the economy or more is probably pretty impervious to this. They're already at home, whether we shut down tomorrow or not. So I'm a little less worried about the economic fallout in the short term than most people are overall. And I do think that once those vaccines hit next year, we're going to have a big year, 6% growth. What I don't know is how far ahead, to Lisa's point, how far ahead are we already pricing a lot of that in?
I mean, Jim, this is so important, this conversation we're having, folks. And, Jim, I want to bring it to Minnesota, and that you and I grew up with 3M was sure money. Minnesota mining and manufacturing was free money, minting money, because they always adapted and adjusted. There's that belief that, corporations will adapt and adjust. Is that what we're underpricing here, Jim? Is that all of corporate America, as a basic equity stance, will adapt to the cards they're dealt and do better than the gloom that Lisa feels very much so?
I totally concur with that, Tom. I think the pandemic has been a great demonstration of the adaptability of capitalism in this country. If you think back on where we were initially and how we've adapted what companies are doing to make things safer and to be able to operate during a deadly pandemic in a fairly safe fashion in most cases. It isn't really, you don't hear so many cases with companies that are operating as much as you do with youth spreaders at college and so forth. Companies have adapted that. And not only that, but they're finding new ways. We had food trucks here in Minneapolis that have opened restaurants during the pandemic. While other restaurants are closing, they're opening restaurants. And so I do think that we find new ways. Imagine what this pandemic would have been like 20 years ago had we not had the technology that we have, so 75% of the economy could keep working from home.
Right, John, a serious question. Do you perceive British companies as malleable as Jim Paulsen and I perceive American corporations? Do they adapt and adjust to things like Brexit?
They're adjusting. Never mind Brexit. I think a question we need to be asking is the transformational powers of capitalism have been pushed to one side through this in the American economy, in the European economy perhaps more so?
I don't think so, Jonathan. I think we're going to come out of this stronger than ever. You know, I think that we've dumped in so much stimulus, and companies are with the opportunity of low rates that they have today, and we look at a lot of borrowings that are taken down, but that's like a big injection of capital that they're going to use. They're sitting on a lot of liquidity, and I think as we get closer to this thing ending, they're going to be going, well, okay, man, we've got to up our staffs, we've got to go ahead and rebuild inventories. We're going to look again at our capital spending programs long term. I think we're going to adapt and be quite dynamic after this pandemic. We're going to find a new way to deal with retail and than we did before. You know, we're going to, I think, find many new solutions after this pandemic.